Asia Tech Podcast. Voice of the Asian tech ecosystem.
This is Ashley Talks, Graham Brown, and Ashley Galina, Dudarenok. Today we're going to talk about something which I fear may raise a little bit of criticism. Close your ears, folks, if you're easily offended. We're going to talk about some powerful subjects. Ashley, welcome to the show.
Hi, Graham. Fantastic to be here.
I say welcome to the show. This is actually your show. I mean, you're going to take it on from here. But today, this subject is all about something very close to your heart. We're going to talk about personal branding and female entrepreneurship. Well, you're not going to pull any punches today. You're going to go straight in. I think we were talking off air, listeners. Ashley's message is quite strong. So I think some people are going to find maybe a little bit of contention, which is great. I mean, this is what has to happen. Ashley, why did you pick these subjects first? Why are we talking about this?
Well, we're talking about these two subjects because business world are talking about right now, at least in my space. So first of all, personal branding. We've heard that for the past 2 years, and we've heard it from different entrepreneurs, from Gary Vee to just name anyone, right? That you need to build a personal brand if you are going to play a long game, if you are in business long term. You don't have, it's not optional anymore. It's not something that you can, you can escape. If you want to be in business, you need to do that. So I've also went through this, I've gone through this transformation in the past, say year and a half. I started putting myself out there. I started a blog, a vlog, a YouTube channel. I wrote a book. I really became that, personal branding evangelist, you would say. Yeah. And I see the power of it. It has significantly transformed my business and the way I see opportunities, and it transformed and made myself better as well. So I thought it was really cool to start talking about that. And I will bring, throughout this podcast, I will bring guests that will be, making this topic and opening up this topic even further. And then the second angle is female entrepreneurship, I would say. Everybody's right now talking about, Me Too movement. And there's been a couple of very famous and popular books like Lean In by Sheryl Sandberg and Good Girls Don't Get a Corner Office that talk about, women being oppressed at workplace, explaining why there are so few women in business. There are articles every week. I read Economist a lot, right? So every week there are articles in Economist that talk about, women in boardroom and what's being done and how it's not enough, etc. So it's a very hot topic. And me, as a female entrepreneurship, I have an opinion, and I have a message that I want to deliver essentially to other business women and women that aspire to be successful professionally at workplace and in business. I think that we need to basically change the focus of the whole conversation.
Yeah, and that's not going to happen easily, is it? I think
No.
Exactly. You're opening yourself to criticism, and that's what we're going to talk about in today's podcast, isn't it? I mean, your message.
Asia Tech Podcast. Find out more at atp.show.
I think it's brave. I mean, you're standing out there and you're opening yourself up to criticism. And in a way, that sort of is a key part of personal branding as well, isn't it? That you have to be vulnerable and you have to put yourself out there. You have to, work out who your fans are and deliver the message to the fans and not edit yourself to please everybody, right?
I absolutely love that, the way you put it. You mentioned it last time, I think we had a podcast, and you said, don't edit yourself. Yeah. I absolutely loved it. And this is a fantastic quote. I'm putting it in my book and I'm giving it's literally beautiful. It is a huge element of personal branding. You need to stop being afraid to be judged. And it is difficult for any human being. All of us have this need to be loved, and we are afraid of not being enough, not being smart enough, not being, professional enough, not being liked enough. So we have these fears. But for women, it just feels that fear is, I don't know whether it's stronger or we just focus on it more, but it feels that it's a lot more difficult to put ourselves out there.
Right.
So yes, if you do personal branding, that's the default. You need to stop caring what people say. You need to deliver the message you are powerful, you are passionate about. It needs to be a powerful message, and you need to really live it. And I think that's what makes it, that's what makes it unique. That's what makes it your personal brand.
It's interesting you brought up Gary Vaynerchuk earlier. I mean, Gary V. And he's obviously a big proponent of personal branding. He's out there doing his thing. I find that really fascinating. I mean, he has a massive following, and he's really sort of built that through personal branding. I mean, he started off doing his wine club thing, when he got people in to drink wine with him, which is just, it's just a very interesting way of doing it. But, a lot of people find his style off-putting. They don't like him. And I think this is really interesting because I don't think he cares. He's almost like saying, I don't care. I don't give a shit if you don't like my style. This is me, and I'm not editing myself. If you don't like me, move on, find somebody else, right? And in a way, you talk about that sort of fear for women being stronger. It must be harder, right? I mean, I'm not a woman, so I'm not going to speak for women, but I'm just wondering, that for Gary Vee to do that, maybe, at a younger age, it was easier for him to do that because he's a guy, that's kind of a thing that guys do, rough and tumble, take the knocks, play with bricks, all those kind of things. Whereas women, I don't know, it must be harder because to do that and to stand up and say, okay, I'm open to criticism when you're growing up, that must have a big impact on you.
Right. Because we don't have a lot of examples. To be very honest, we don't have a lot of examples of strong, powerful women right now. Like, close your eyes. Think about a woman blogger, business blogger, successful entrepreneur who you really want to learn from, who you really connect with, who you think about one name. Just give me one name.
Ashley.
Yeah.
So you set me up. But apart from you, they're not a lot of people in your space.
Exactly. So first of all, we don't have example. That's why we feel, okay, if it hasn't been done before, that's not for me. And secondly, again, this fear not to be liked or approved, we were taught, everybody was taught to be a good boy or a good girl. But girls were, were taught from early age, what does that mean exactly to be a good girl? And very often it wasn't putting yourself out there, and it wasn't overachieving, and it wasn't, being controversial, and it was all about being liked, right? So you need to just understand that and, and work with it. And in terms of Gary Vee, to be very honest, when you were talking about, his style and how people don't like him, I don't connect with his style. I don't like swearing and all these, dirty words, but he's passionate. When I saw him live, when I actually met Gary, I understood him a lot more. But when I watched, and I never was a big fan. A friend of mine was a huge fan, and he kept telling me that I need to check out Gary Vee. So finally, when I did, I was just, oh my goodness, who is this guy? What is he doing? What's wrong with people following him? Because he's got 3 messages. His message number 1 is positivity wins, and secondly, work hard, and third one is, don't care about anyone and do personal branding and marketing and explore new platforms. These are the 3 messages I feel that he just keeps repeating and, going in circles around. And it's great. I mean, it's easy to understand what is he all about. And he shares his life to unprecedented extent. And, so when I watched his podcast, I felt, or his Gary Vee show, for that matter, I felt that, first of all, he's very forceful. And some of those guests that come, they are, I do not know, famous investors and famous entrepreneurs, and he just goes on them, and he doesn't let them say a word or finish a sentence. And I felt that, first of all, that's rude. That's really rude. And he's got that passion, but I felt that it wasn't directed, the right way. And then he swears, and then he's all about me, me, me. So of course he gave me a certain impression. Again, when I met him in person, I realized that he is really a very genuine person. And he really feels this way, and he doesn't edit himself. And he's got huge followership because there are people that connect with the way, not only the message, but also the way he presents it. And that's beautiful. Yeah. And you know what? People cannot judge him. First of all, he doesn't charge for his content. He's creating it. He puts it out there. He doesn't force you to watch it. It's not one of those advertisings that you just cannot skip, while watching a YouTube video. Nobody pushes you to follow him and listen to his messages. And so that's the beauty of it. That's the beauty of new media and being an influencer and, building a personal brand.
But could I know that sounds like a stupid question, so smack me down. But could there be a female Gary Vee now?
Absolutely.
Right. And why isn't
ready,
there one?
But women themselves need to be ready.
Right.
So these women need to start putting themselves out there. They need to go with passion. They need to go with force, power. They need to go with unpopular messages that are really, really, that are really in their heart, and then they need to focus on the outcome. The outcome is to change the status quo, is to have more, more, not only women in business. I mean, what's the purpose of having more women in business or diversity? It's about creating value for others, value for economy, value for yourself. So that's the outcome. Let's focus on the outcome. Let's get more women actually doing that. Let's have women talk about non-female subjects as well.
Yes.
Amazing. The women talk about, we are being oppressed, we're being that, we're being this. It's great that we started talking about it. At the same time, if you want to attract audiences besides other women, you need to talk about universal subjects. Yeah. Get depth, get the knowledge, get the confidence. Most of the women, I know so many extraordinary women. Again, they are extremely deep. They know so much stuff, but they don't put themselves out there. So how can you expect a different result? How can you expect a female Gary Vee? I think we are ready. We just don't have enough women doing that. Men are ready to listen to women. Yeah. Women are ready to listen to women.
Exactly.
And knowledge. So let's just do that.
Well, I wonder, you mentioned it earlier, and I think this is so right. You said examples, and we're talking about stories, really. And I guess the reason why we're doing ASH3 Talks as well is because we're putting it out there that this is an option. If you're a woman, you don't have to sit and just listen to men all the time, right?
Of course.
But we talked off air about role models, and you mentioned, for example, Sheryl Sandberg, and we talked about like Michelle Obama, Hillary Clinton. But the interesting thing about these examples is, I know this is controversial, but I'm going to say it, is that they've got to their position because of, their family connections, right? Not necessarily purely on merit. I mean, Hillary Clinton was only, nominated because she was the wife of Bill Clinton, right? I don't know if she could have done it on her own. I mean, she's a smart woman, et cetera, et cetera. So, but, we're short of examples, aren't we? We really are. I mean, I think, when you grew up, as many women around the world were, you were exposed to the stories of like Disney, and it would have been like Sleeping Beauty and Cinderella. I mean, what kind of examples, you talk about personal branding, what kind of examples are those for women where you just kind of like, you just have to make yourself pretty for Prince Charming, right? I mean, that has an impact, surely.
It definitely has an impact. And to be very honest, I consider myself extremely lucky. I was born and I grew up in Soviet Union, right? So non-existent country right now, but it was Soviet Union. And people have different memories from that time. And a lot of people will also disagree with me right now, also from the former Soviet Union space. But in Soviet Union, women, in my opinion, were equal to men. Yeah, my mom, for example, I've got a brother who is 7 years older than me, but she started working 2 weeks after basically giving birth to both of us.
Wow.
Yeah. She was working full time all her life. In fact, for my parents, it was never an option for my mom to stay at home because men worked, women worked, and they both shared household duties. And, that was the default. And of course, my grandmother's generation was somewhat different, but my grandmother also worked her whole life. And she was for many years breadwinner. And, that was, so I was surrounded by, I would say, at least the examples in my family and in general in that part of Russia where I'm from the Far East, but my parents, met in St. Petersburg. So from those two places, there were a lot of powerful women. And that I think was something that really impacted me and influenced me. And then I moved to, I was studying in UK and New Zealand and then later on mainland China. And I saw that the same default, the same mentality is also installed in China. You know how Mao Zedong said that women hold half the sky?
Yeah.
That famous phrase. And he didn't say it because he was so, in favor of women going out there and working. He just really needed labor. He really needed women to work, 14 hours a day or 12 hours a day because the economy was in trouble. So they copied a lot of let's say, Soviet mentality. And again, Stalin and Lenin and all those guys did not equalize women because they felt so strongly about helping them. Right. They did it because they had very few men, and we went through Second World War, and we really needed women to work and take up a lot of male roles and duties, etc. And throughout Soviet Union, we had stories, we had books, we had movies with very strong female characters. So when the rest of the world were watching Cinderellas and Sleeping Beauty, to be very honest, I mean, all those cartoons from 50s, 60s, 70s, Disney cartoons, they came to Russia and the Soviet Union as such much, much later. So I started watching Disney cartoons, in late 90s with Bambi and Lion King and stuff, right? And so I had very different, not role models, but I was exposed to that part. And that's beautiful. And that's what gave that power and confidence. And yet I was still influenced by this, the way women shall behave and, what is your role and blah, blah, blah. So all those things. I actually feel that talking about Russia, for instance, my home country, that right now Russia is a lot more patriarchal than it used to be when I was young. Right now, women are less empowered, a lot less empowered than it was when, let's say 28, 30 years ago, 25 years ago.
It's fascinating that things can change like that and even go backwards, as you say. And that you've also talked about China and Asia as an example. Obviously, that's something that's very interesting to our listeners and the role of women there, because I don't have the data to hand, but something like, if you're a billionaire, for example, a female billionaire in China, you're more likely to be self-made than anywhere else in the world if you're a female billionaire. Whereas a lot of the female billionaires in the US or Europe, for example, are inherited wealth. I mean, Paris Hilton is a good example, right? I mean, she's no role model, really, is she, for entrepreneurs? But, there's a lot of emerging, quite powerful entrepreneurs, females in Asia who we don't really have sort of parallels in the rest of the world. What's going on at the moment in that sort of space? I mean, is there sort of a generation coming through? I'm just really curious from the outside why that's happening and why there are these super successful female entrepreneurs in Asia.
Well, I think honestly, it started with this policy of opening and, Deng Xiaoping saying that becoming rich and getting rich is glorious, and that's how you get country out of economical difficulties. And again, men and women in China very similarly, very similar to Soviet Union, were empowered, and they were told for at least one generation that they are equal to men in many ways. Right? They had to work the same hours. They had to do, tons of things. They work, many of them work in factories and etc. China is a bit controversial. It really depends where you come from, because there is this very traditional society which says, okay, a girl is never going to achieve what a guy or a son is going to achieve. That's why they also had these waves of abortion. And, they were trying to get rid of, because they only had one child, right, policy. So they were trying to get rid of girls, etc. And there's a lot of leftover children. Many of them are girls. Many boys, they actually take to town, etc. But there's another side to that coin, when some women, especially in cities, they were empowered and they were, they got teaching jobs and they got supervisory jobs and engineering jobs back in communist, very early communist China, I would say. And that also created role models, and opportunities were given. And it was all about education. Many of those, China was going through this huge industrialization and, technological advancement stage. And that's where you needed qualified labor, people that actually had to do very well in universities and bring this knowledge to the workplace. And I think that's how women started. And China is a land of opportunities. So if you are strong, powerful, if you are just going for it, if you have the right guanxi, in terms of, in China, like in Russia, like in the rest of the world, you still need to build connections. And when I talk about guanxi, I'm not talking about, being married to Bill Clinton in order to, a president or candidate to presidency. But I'm talking about building human connections and relationships. And women are really good at that. We're really good. We are, honestly, I feel, and maybe again, men will say, oh my goodness, she doesn't know what she's talking about. But I feel that we are better at this emotional intelligence in understanding other people's needs and being able to meet our needs together with somebody else's needs. And it's really about making the pie bigger. Also, this philosophy of, everybody wins. It is possible, and it is easier to rewire your mind, I feel, to fit this model for a woman rather than a man. So I think that's where women thrive in China. They are able to play on those historical, basement and playground, plus use their ability to build connections and networks much better.
So let's talk about that mindset, Ashley, because that's where I'm getting ready now to duck from the bricks are going to be thrown. What do you think about, I know your opinions on this. I think we have to share this, is that, and you tell it as it is. And this is where I respect you completely, because you don't necessarily edit yourself just to please everybody. And you say what needs to be said rather than what people want to hear. There's a lot of focus in the media on movements like Me Too or We Too, these kind of things, like, as it evolves to places like Japan, it changes all over Asia. But Me Too obviously is like one of the big movements. There's a lot of focus. Obviously, you've mentioned Sheryl Sandberg, Lean In, a lot of people writing about these issues. Are they getting it right? Are we focusing on the right things? You talk about mindset. Are they training female entrepreneurs to think the way they need to think?
Well, in my opinion, no. In my opinion, every time I read, and I read a lot of books about, let's say women in business and, all those things, it feels that every time I put down a book, the author wants to tell me how men oppress women and, how it is an unfair business world and workplace and, how we need to fight them back and and then in order to get those opportunities and grasp those opportunities, leaning in across the table, sitting through meetings, not being intimidated, blah blah blah. And really the focus is all on those issues and all on those messages, how women are weak and we haven't been given equal opportunities. In my opinion, the focus shall be what are we great at and how do we move forward? What is our end outcome? What is our end goal? All right. And here, that's what we are currently failing to do. We don't have examples of successful women talking about that. We just focus on creating more people or getting more people on board with the message that it's not equal and it's not fair and it's not how it's supposed to be. That's great. And it's great to talk about it. How historically it wasn't necessarily, equal and all, happy and, flowers everywhere. Yes, but that's how world is. It was unfair how, Western, explorers took, Aboriginal lands, and it was unfair, but these Aboriginal people move forward. They go beyond and they work on their issues, not only focusing on what was that before and how we need to, exclude men and support only other women. And, we need to put all effort there. We need to work beyond and we need to focus on what is it we ultimately want to achieve. I feel that a lot of problems there actually lie within women, again, within our the way we perceive ourselves. The more we talk about us being victims necessarily, the more we become and behave like victims. Right. I never felt, I'm a female entrepreneur. I have 2 companies. I have a vlog. I wrote a book. I'm out there talking to people. I'm being invited and I met many extraordinary human beings out there, very successful, very powerful men. And I can tell you, none of them made me feel inferior. None of them. But I saw so many women given those opportunities and they felt inferior themselves because they were so focused on, oh my God, I'm a woman. Stop. Forget about being a woman. Think about being a professional. Think about having and understanding your strength. Think about, putting yourself out there and building a company, building a personal brand, writing a book, doing those things. Think about you being a complete human being, move beyond and break through, forget about those I wouldn't say just forget about what women in general been through, or there are some women being oppressed right now. Of course not. Of course, support them. But you yourself, if you lead, if you are in front, if you are showing the way, you will empower and inspire other women to step up. That's what you necessarily need to be doing. Yeah, looking ahead.
Yeah, this is the tough central issue, isn't it? I mean, you talk about women in a way jeopardizing themselves, and I think it's easier to blame somebody else for your own problems, isn't it? Because I'm a victim. It's sort of an easy way of doing it. It's a cop-out. It's a way of saying, okay, I'm not responsible, therefore, it's all these people's.
Exactly.
I think it was Tony Robbins that said that, you only get ahead when you give up your story of what's holding you back. And I think, I wonder what that is for a woman. You talk about women being intimidated by successful men. Well, that has to be a starting point. I mean, you're never going to become successful if you can't hold company with these men. And what I understand is, and I don't understand this enough, but I haven't read the book, fully. Sheryl Sandberg's lean is telling women to sort of almost go head to head with men, almost like, be a bit more aggressive and stand up and so on. Whereas you're sort of saying that's not kind of the right way of doing things.
Yeah, so in my opinion, I mean, exactly like Tony Robbins says, it is the story that you tell yourself. And Les Brown talks about exactly the same thing. It's about the story that you tell yourself. That little voice in your head that keeps telling you who you are, what you are like, what you want, what you don't want. That is necessarily what holds a lot of women back. Change your story. Stop being a victim. Go and work on yourself. Go put yourself out there, and a lot of things will really change. In terms of what kind of story women tell themselves, I do not know about others. I think many women really feel that, but for me, it's more difficult. I'm a woman. But for me, it's more difficult. I don't come from a family, that can propel me somewhere. So we still have those expectations. You still expect men to propel you somewhere, or expect somebody to do something for you. If you say that you are equal and that you are, fantastic, and that you are professional, and this is a competitive workplace, then you need to stop expecting stuff from people. Nobody owes you anything. You need to work your way up, and you need to be confident, and you need to view yourself as that, professional and as that person. Do
you think in the future that success will be measured by the fact that we no longer have to talk about female entrepreneurs, and it's
Absolutely.
How far? I mean, that must be a long way away, isn't it? I mean, every conference has something talking about female entrepreneurs, or the other day I went to a startup accelerator, and they had the Female Entrepreneur Award.
Yes.
I mean, is that the right thing to do, or we focus too much on it?
Yeah, we've got an award. We've got a conference just for women. We've got so many women business clubs, etc. So basically, what we start to do now, we start to exclude men. We start to building, a community that's just for women. And we try to, sort of say that we are supporting each other. And again, I'm not against all of those things. It's great that they're appearing, but you cannot exclude the other sex. You cannot exclude other opportunities. You cannot just focus on being a victim. Break out of it and go get them. There's a lot of opportunities in terms of education, free education, paid education. There's a lot of opportunities at work place and workforce. There's a lot of opportunities in business. And anyone, no matter whether you're a national minority, or you are a woman, or you are young, or you're old, or you're retired, or whatever, you can do this. You just need to start actually working towards those goals.
Hard talk. Let's put this in the context of personal branding. So personal branding is obviously, I mean, you're a great example of this. Is you're putting yourself out there. You're planting a flag, standing for something. Are you conscious of what your message is? Do you sort of sit down and think about, this is my message, this is what I want to say? Because you talked about Gary Vee as an example, having a message. Have you sort of worked that out? I'm always sort of, when I think about that for myself, I find it quite hard to write down messages in terms of personal branding, because sometimes it's hard to actually logically put it on a piece of paper. It's just sort of something you think inside. What do you do with yourself in terms of your message and personal brand?
Yeah. So when I just started a year and a half ago, it was all about my professional expertise. Yeah. So I started personal branding for a major reason. I wanted to grow my business. Yeah. I wanted to see how personal branding can impact that. So okay, my businesses were 2 agencies, and basically I work with China and, social networks in China. So I said, okay, my message is I'm going to teach people about social media in China, and I'm going to share a lot of content that is not obvious, information beyond obvious, my professional knowledge, things that I accumulated in the past 10, 12 years of hard labor and trial and errors. I'm going to share all that in order to help others. That's how I started. And I am passionate about China, and I know China very well. And for the first couple of months, nobody reacted to my content, and I kept putting it out. And you need to be ready for that. Nobody cares. Nobody cares. Only when you deliver disproportional value, then people start noticing you. So at one point, one of my videos about WeChat went, I wouldn't say viral, but it went definitely popular. And that's what gave me, I would say, this much needed confidence that, that there is audience for my content. And I just need to keep doing that. And then all these amazing things happened. I was, more and more people subscribed to the channel. More and more people started interacting with me on LinkedIn. A lot of media inquiries came in. I was invited to Alibaba Global Influencer Entourage meeting, where you meet people like Jack Ma and Joe Tsai, and you actually have intimate briefings with them, with a group of 12 global influencers, right, for 3 days. And then again, the book and all those things came out of my decision to go and put myself out there. And in terms of message, later on, of course, to be very honest, China for me is very, very small. Just talking about China is not enough. I don't want to be associated as, okay, this China girl, because I've got big ambitions. So, and also China is a part of my interest, but it's not all of it. If you have one passion in life and you want to talk about it and you have very strong message and you are sure that there are people that would benefit immensely, disproportionately from that message, then go ahead. But I see that there are 3 necessarily aspects of me that I want to share. Number one, yes, is China. And that was the easiest for me because it was my professional expertise. The second aspect is personal branding. Because I started doing that, I actually gained certain, I would say, success and exposure through it. I think I'm qualified to talk about it. And we are not doing enough. And, this kind of branding, personal branding, those aspects, I'm extremely pumped and extremely excited to share my story and, some tips and learn from others as well, because it's conversation that moves people. This conversation is exchange of information. And the last one is female entrepreneurship, because I see so many women around me telling themselves the wrong story, focusing on the wrong thing and playing victims. And they are being trained to do that. And they are, through media and through all those things. So we are trying to help situation. And in many, many ways, psychologically, we are actually making situation, I wouldn't say worse, but definitely not where it's supposed to be. Right. So these are the 3 messages. And I, at one point, actually wrote them down. I said, Ashley stands for China. Ashley stands for blogging/personal branding, and Ashley stands for female entrepreneurship. These are the 3 messages I'm inspired by and I want to share. And maybe 5 years down the road, these messages are going to be different. But for now, these are they.
That has to be one of the biggest challenges in personal branding, isn't it? Is choosing the messages or at least finding them. You've picked 3 really exciting areas. Do they have to be related? Because I think this is a challenge people face, isn't it? Is that I might want to pick, this message, it could be China, and I might want to pick, for example, autonomous vehicles, because I love that space. I might want to pick travel. And on the face of it, they don't appear to be related. Do they have to be? Because there's that risk, isn't it, that you sort of might end up giving people different messages to different audiences and so on. How do you sort of work all that in your head, that you've got these 3 messages which appear on the surface, maybe not necessarily related?
Yeah, so I feel that this connection between all 3 messages that you have is you. You are the person that is interested in this, and you gained certain professional or business success in that area, so you are qualified to talk about it and share it. Right. Then you are interested in another thing, and you've done your research, and you love it, and you are passionate about it. You are the link. So when you talk about A, and then you talk about B, and then you talk about C, you have all this information, all this experience, all this knowledge. in you. So you will be able to, make it interesting for various audiences. And again, you're not trying to be liked by everyone. You're not trying to reach everybody with your message. What you're trying to do is to share what you know, to help others, to provide this information beyond obvious. And if you do that from the right place, with the right heart, and with a lot of literally massive action and a lot of work, it's a lot of work, you will be heard and you will get your audience. So I don't think it is a big problem as long as your message is not contradicting one another. Yeah, but that is also not possible. How can one person who is sane, how can one sane person start talking about, I do not know, I'm supporting female entrepreneurs, and the second message, I'm not supporting them? Then, of course, it doesn't work.
So the common theme in the branding is you. That's a really important part, isn't it? Because that's maybe where people feel the most uncomfortable, because you have these domain areas. So you talk about China and you talk about female entrepreneurship and personal branding, but what connects it is you and your story. And through listening to this podcast, people will already know, for example, that you came from the east coast of Russia, that you studied and lived in New Zealand and the UK, etc., etc. You're giving away parts of your story as well. I guess the advantage of having podcasts is you can do more of that, right? You can sort of give people a window into your life. And some people don't want to do that. Some people kind of feel a bit, I don't know if I should tell them about my travels or, what I did today, because they feel that that's not relevant to business. But what you're saying is like that story is actually more relevant. That's what people connect with, isn't it? The story.
It's absolutely true. And only by telling your story, only by actually telling them how you do that and demystifying a lot of things, When people look at me, again, some men, some women, and they say, oh my goodness, how can you do all those things in such a short period of time? How can you launch? I've got a little TV show, a small TV show on local TV here in Hong Kong, and then a book, and then this, and then you're running companies, and then you're traveling all around the world, and you're participating in this, I do not know, Tony Robbins trainings or whatever. People say, how can you do all that? And when you literally walk them through the process and you tell them, where I come from, how I do stuff, etc. When you give it away, you empower them necessarily. You show them that it is possible. If I can do it, and I'm just a normal person, ordinary person who put disproportional and extraordinary amount of work into what I believe in and what I want, I know my outcome. So that makes a difference and people get inspired. Right. Besides that, I also believe that, all this information, okay, there are two ways, there are two things. All this information, your professional knowledge or the message that you're passionate about and that you have and that you lived through, this information was given to you in order for you to perfect it and pass it on, not to keep it, to pass it on. That's why people that, get most have the most responsibility to give it, digest it and give it to other people. So you act as the connector, as the information passover. That's who you are. So in order to deliver that information, and all of us pretty much have the same information. I mean, look at Tim Ferriss or Tony Robbins or Gary Vee. All of them are talking about very similar things. Many like Oprah, they all talk about meditating and, purposeful silence. And they talk about, knowing your outcome, not just focusing on your to-dos and this and that and this and that. However, the way they share that message is unique to them. Because they do it through their own stories, through their own examples, through their own experiences. And therefore, they are able to reach very different audiences. So if you're not willing, if you have the message, if you have this professional knowledge, and you can start small, start with your professional knowledge, something that you're comfortable with, something that you can talk for half a year about. So if you have that, but you are not introducing and mixing yourself into how you present it, then it becomes a university lecture. Nobody cares. Nobody wants to listen to a lecture.
Exactly. I can get that online, right? I mean, I can go and just read a blog but what you're doing is you're creating that human angle. And I'm fascinated by this idea of disproportional value because you've mentioned it a couple of times. It's quite important to help the listeners understand what exactly that is. What are you talking about?
Yeah, so disproportional value, a lot of people start, let's say, writing a blog because they are trying to get leads. And that sounds like a, sound idea. Or I'm going to speak at this event and I'm planning to get, let's say, 5 leads out of it because I spoke about, subjects that people are interested in and they feel that I'm an expert, blah, blah, blah. So they come to me. But that's the wrong place to start. And if you start with going there to that event or writing that blog that would deliver information beyond obvious, information that you worked on for years to find, understand, break down. If you are giving that huge value, much more than people ever imagined you're going to deliver, then you will connect with people on a very different level. It's not marketing, it's teaching. It's teaching, it's passing over that knowledge. It's making it understandable, personal, and real. That's what matters. When you do that, you build real connection with people. You become, in a way, their mentor in this professional field or in life or in business or somewhere else for this small thing, for this small subject. But every time they will think about it, you will pop up. And that's what you're trying to create. And creating this disproportional value, that needs to be your outcome. And if this is the story you tell yourself again, and if this is how you view every blogging, vlogging, media opportunity, speaking opportunity, you will get disproportional amount of benefits. Maybe not directly from those people, but again, from other opportunities. Because this energy attracts. Yeah, it's really, maybe it sounds a bit esoteric and people feel, oh my goodness, now she talks about energy and how is this possible? But it's true because people will see what you are doing. People will invite you to more fantastic events. You will speak in front of more audiences. You will bring them even more value. Even if those people don't need your, consultation services or whatever right now, they will always remember you and they will recommend you to their network. You never try to sell. You never try to put yourself first and self promote or get followers, etc. You don't do that. You're trying to give value first, give first and give more. I know that Gary Vee talks about, 51%, right? So he says you always need to give 51% and receive 49. So you always give more than others give you. And maybe that's the right balance. I do not know. For me, I give a lot more, but at the same time, I get more. And then I give more again. And then I get more. And then it just goes on and on and on. And it's self-fulfilling and self-growing kind of, circle of energy. And
well, it's an investment, isn't it? That's the key. You've mentioned it already, taking a long-term approach. When you started your own self-branding, you said 2 months with nothing, right? So, you have to go out there and have that long-term mindset that I'm going to do this. I'm not going to worry about what the return is. I'm just going to go out there and add some kind of value to the world out there and these people with this message, right? And that will pay me back in time. But, I'm not going to go in and say, I need 10 leads per podcast episode, but otherwise it's not worth my time.
And that is why sharing that story, my story with others is so important because many people give up. They start giving value, and they don't see results. They don't see, business coming in or whatever. Yeah. And that is why it's important for other leaders to share their story and say, you know what, I've been there. And it's okay, half a year. It's okay for 8 months. No problem. It's going to come. Keep doing it. It's important to give people that confidence.
Wow. This is such a powerful subject as well, because hopefully this is moving people to think about this. One thing you mentioned, which I think is one of the biggest challenges that people have with personal branding, you talk about setting yourself up almost like a mentor. So you're taking a position of leadership. One of the doubts that I hear people say is that, I can't do that. I can't be an expert on this. And there's something called the Impostor Syndrome, isn't it? Which is like, where you find yourself in a situation where you think, I'm not worthy of doing this. How did I get it? Yeah, exactly. This goes back to female entrepreneurship as well, is that, I'm in this world, like one of those fairy tales where, they swap roles and the prince and the pauper type thing. But, that happens to us in business and branding as well, is that I'm in this situation. I don't think I can lead people. I don't think I can, influence people's lives or make change or tell stories or, I'm not the marketing expert on autonomous vehicles or Japan or Indonesia, all those kind of things, those doubts that people have in their head. How do you deal with that? Because everybody must face that at some point, right?
Definitely. I had that as well. When I just started, I was just so nervous. I was just like, my goodness, what if I say something? And, China moves very fast, right? So once you say something about, let's say, China or some of the platforms or some of the realities of the way business is done, what if I say something and by the time it's out, for example, that article, it's already something else? What if somebody within my industry is going to, come to me and say, what you're doing is absolute bullshit. We've been through very different experience, or we disagree, and that's how we serve customers, and that's a better case here, worst case there. So I was terrified at first, but you need to understand that what helped me personally. You need to understand that everybody has exactly the same fear. Everybody has the fear of not being enough, smart enough, expert enough, having the right information. So that helped me a lot. So if I have those fears, then those other guys that are not putting ourselves out there must have even bigger fears because they don't do it.
So even somebody like Gary Vee will be thinking that as well in the dark corner of his mind.
Definitely. I totally feel that Gary Vee is also terrified. He's terrified, and he also doesn't nobody likes to be judged and disliked, etc. I'm sure, and the way he says that, he doesn't care, everybody cares. Everybody cares because we all have, our deepest fear is not to be loved by, our family or our peer group or, our followers or, other people. That's the fear that we have, but we need to learn how to manage it because that's what prevents you from so many things. The second thing that helped me, apart from that, was that I actually saw how experts are being made. I looked at successful examples, how somebody wrote a book or how somebody, did something and then they shot to the top. And I thought, okay, can I break that process down? Can I just write down in bullet points what needs to be done to become that, perceived expert? Because I already have the knowledge. I already have the experience. I already speak the language. I already, I'm already there. But can I break it down? And can I just do those things, follow those steps? And if yes, I'm sure that I'm going to get to that stage and that level and get that recognition and, and get my audience, etc. So that's what helped me. And yeah.
Well, what is that? Tell me about that, because I know Tony Robbins talks a lot about that as well, in the sense that success leaves tracks. You can break down the success of somebody who's achieved something you want to achieve into, like you say, bullet points. And, Tim Ferriss is the same. It's all about modeling, isn't it?
Yeah.
What did you learn in that process that you could share here?
I will tell a story how I actually saw something extremely complicated to be broken down into very small pieces. So we are working with a co-founder of Tencent, right? And we are helping him promote a philanthropy project of his globally. And as a part of that philanthropy project, they hired Economist Intelligence Unit to commence the research of global economies, 35 economies around the world, and rank them based on, how good or how prepared are they for the future of education, how much money they're investing in education, etc. And basically, the Economist Intelligence Unit came back half a year later with a let's say 50-page report and ranking all those countries. And they ranked Nigeria and Russia at the bottom of the list for some categories. And I was speaking with the lady who put together a report, and I was asking her, how are you actually, how can you put a number? How can you rank those countries? What is it you're doing? And she told me that they basically go out there, internet and free resources and some paid resources, and they collect information that's readily available. And then they try to make sense of that information and just wing it. So basically, simply put, they are obviously professionals and they have some, resources, but they are to a large extent just trying to use their common sense, to get there. And then I saw how that report was obviously promoted digitally through The Economist, through, the Partners Network, and educators around the world picked it up and they started referring to that ranking and referring to that score, and it became international thing. And right now it's second, third year they keep doing that. So that's how you can start something from nothing. And the same with the person with personal brand. Yeah. What I saw is extremely important. Number one is you need to start with a blog, or you can do it on LinkedIn, or you can do it. I don't like writing. It's a pain in the ass for me. It's really tough. It's very slow. So for me, videos are much easier because I like to talk. I was terrified to put my face on the video, but it worked. So you need to find a medium where you can start sharing that stuff. And when you're small, you just go there. You just wing it because nobody's watching either way. Very few people are watching. So actually you have that space and you have this opportunity to, be yourself and just try and just put it out there. At the same time, make sure that content is high quality so that people can discover you. The second thing that every successful person does is they start working very closely with media. So you need to reach out to journalists, and you need to be featured in Forbes, and you need to get to some TV channels, and that is two things. First of all, once you become expert more and more, media comes to you. And because you are ready to provide them value, disproportional value, and you're ready to give them case studies and spend hours a day writing those articles for them. Yeah. So media later on just edits it and throws a couple of quotes from somebody else. But if you're ready to do that, they also understand that you're building a lasting relationship. You're willing to become an ongoing contributor. So that part, working with media, gives you a lot of weight. And the other thing that you need to do is you need to put yourself out there physically. You cannot just be an online personality, a talking head. Nobody wants to have a talking head. Just go out there, mingle with people. And I mean, it depends. If you are small, you're just starting out, speak at any and every event you can. Last year, for instance, and that was not my first year speaking, but last year alone, I spoke at 58 events. 58. This year, I'm going to speak probably at around 60 events, but most of them are paid. So that's the difference. That's how you move up the ladder.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is once you move up, you need to do other things. For example, the book. I wrote the book, and I mean, writing a book is one thing. I think we spoke about it very briefly last time, but marketing that book is just 3 times the work. And you need to have those relationships with other industry partners. In my case, it's other agencies, and you need to, really come to them and say, that's the book. Please look at the manuscript. And guys, I would really appreciate if you could help. And, you need to have this relationship with people already. So previously I delivered value to them. I featured them in my blogs. I went to their events to speak, and I brought value. So right now, I was in position to actually, ask for help, and many of them did. I couldn't have ever become an Amazon bestseller if my network of, let's say, 20 agencies and other partners wouldn't have just blasted an email and said this amazing book is coming out and it's Ashley's and we totally love it and blah, blah, blah. I couldn't have done it without them. And I give them a lot of credit for that. So then it's the book, right? And the next thing you do, you start, either you go on TV or you start your own channel, as a professional channel. So that's what happened for me. I actually went to TV. I was invited to be interviewed, here on One TV, and the interview went really well. They got fantastic feedback because I spoke Chinese on that channel and viewers loved it. So the next thing I know, they're asking me to have my own TV show. So now I have my 1 Minute China, and it's been broadcast in mainland and in Hong Kong. I thought it was a fantastic opportunity. Yes, it is a fantastic opportunity to add weight to who I am, but it's so much effort and time, and it's actually not reaching my audience because I'm speaking to Chinese about China. It's a bit comical, right? It's not reaching my audience. So that is why, essentially I thought, okay, let me finish doing that because we've got some agreements and, people are counting on me. But at the same time, let me move to something different where I can really reach my audience more. So I started my channel, and yes, I had my YouTube channel before and all these Ashley Talks and vlogs, but I actually hired a professional crew to fly over to Hong Kong and shoot a, let's say, documentary series about how I did it. And I'm not yet at the top of the ladder, and I'm still going, and, learning never stops and growing never stops, but I have achieved certain level of success. And I feel that it's very valuable to people, again, to inspire them, to show them that this is possible. And that's how this girl from Vladivostok, how she did it out of Hong Kong. And what is she able to do? And okay, if she can do it, I can do it. So I started those episodes, and we are on episode 2 right now. They are extremely professionally produced, and they cost me a lot of money to put together, but it's just a different quality of content. So now with this content, I have a lot more opportunities again. So it just never ends. And these are the major things that I broke down from successful people, and it worked for me. And I know that if somebody will follow the same route, it will work for them.
I mean, it's an amazing story. It takes time, though. And that's, let's sort of break that down, because you've gone into this with a very long-term mindset. I mean, if you, like we said, if you went in very short-term, what do I get out of this? It never would have worked. But you went in, you added disproportional value, you invested in the long-term, you built relationships before you needed something from those people, which is important, because when you needed something, like with the book later on, those people were there. You already had the trust and the guangxi with those people, right? That was so important. So you built that over the long term. And I think this is what listeners have to kind of take on board. They look around and they see successful people like yourself or Gary Vee as an example. What they don't see is the hustle that, that person was like an overnight success, but they don't see that person put in the graveyard shifts. They put in years and years of effort when you didn't even know about them, behind the scenes, and they kept doing it, kept plugging away. Like the first 2 months when nobody was watching, they were still doing their stuff, right? I mean, as an example, Joe Rogan, which is, I think, the most popular podcast in the world, right? Joe Rogan Experience, he's been doing that for 8 years, right? I mean, to get to 1 million downloads an episode takes years and years of work. So you've got to have that faith. So I guess the question I want to ask is, people will maybe thinking, I'm doing my urban gardening podcast out here in Singapore. I've been doing it for 6 months and nobody's like responding to it. Is it because I'm doing something wrong, or people just aren't interested in urban gardening? Because that must be a question people have all the time. It's like, at what point do I know I'm doing it right? What should I be measuring? How long should it take? Is there any sort of guidance there? Yeah,
fantastic question. So let me start with referring to your earlier mention about, time and how much time it takes. It takes time for sure. And for somebody it takes 8 years, for somebody it takes 1 year. For me, I was able to do it very, very fast just because I'm Russian. So I'm rushing all the time. I want things to be done yesterday.
No pun.
And I wrote a book in 3.5 months, and then we marketed it for, maybe 1 month. And, we are where we are right now. So I did it very, very fast. You can do it with the right support. And it will still take you 1 to 2 years. So in terms of when do you know that something is not working, you need to be aware whether people really need your stuff. Are you delivering value? So if you are, running this gardening podcast and gardeners are not listening to podcasts, and there's nobody is telling you that they actually want to listen, or they heard and learned something interesting, it shall not discourage you. But if you understand that the value you deliver is very obvious, the stuff that can be found online, and there's no interesting delivery or cases and stuff, and if you feel that what you are doing can be repeated and replicated, and you're just repeating obvious information, that's the red flag. And you've been doing it for a while and there's no response, so that's the red flag. So you might not necessarily need to change your focus. You might want to change the delivery and the content. Yeah. So I believe that honestly, any topic, if it is knitting or gardening or, Chinese tea or art, I believe that there is a market for that. And Japan, I mean, you are living in Japan, Graham. And Japan is a fantastic example to that, because there are people that are fanatics for, I do not know, Pokemon Go and Godzilla and I do not know, Barbies and people. Everything, yeah. And there is market for everything. Yeah, somebody wants to learn about knitting. Yeah. If you have this as a hobby, if you love Muay Thai, if you love green tea, somebody must love it too. And as long as you can deliver that disproportional, high quality value to them, you will be discovered. You will be, you will be there. It might take you longer, it might take you shorter, but yeah. But if you are delivering obvious information and you're not so passionate yourself, and it's just something that can be found online, that might be challenging. And I think you must, revisit that content thing. But for me personally, it took 6 months. Yeah, it took, my first video was discovered 4 months into me doing videos. 4 months. And then after the first half a year, I felt significant impact. And just to let you know how many videos I did, I published videos minimum 3 times a week. And the first 2 months, it was not daily, five times a week. So I basically spent my whole Saturday writing the script or bullet points, because I didn't read the script, but bullet points, and then recording. And then I edited myself because I didn't want to burden my colleagues. I didn't know whether this is going to work. So I didn't want them to take time to do something that's not going to bring us anything. So I spent my whole Saturday and sometimes half a Sunday doing that consistently for 4 months. Even when I was traveling. I remember I recorded when I was in South Africa in Safari Park, sitting there, next to the little hut and recording from my computer. And, there were like people walking back and forth. But you do that. You do that and it's okay. And right now when I look at those videos and I say, okay, it wasn't the best quality and it wasn't this, but content was always great. And
consistent. That's the key, isn't it? And you did 40 to 50 videos before it really took off. Yeah. That's what you're saying. I mean, that's really important, because a lot of people do something, they do like 4 or 5 podcasts or 4 or 5 videos and they give up because, they're, I'm not getting any response. People aren't reacting to it. I mean, it's fun at the beginning. There's that novelty and excitement, but after that it wears off, doesn't it? And you've got to grind them out. Because, we live in this fast food culture. Everything needs to be fast. Everything needs to be yesterday. Everything. And this is good in one way. And we are connected. There is this technology, blah, blah, blah. But it creates so much complexity and unrealistic expectations. I think the biggest killer of potential is really this unrealistic expectation. Right. But those people who go in with the long term win. That's the key, isn't it? Because everybody's very short term. It's people like yourself who play the long term game who will win in the long term, because people will just fall out around you, right? That's the key. Yeah. And also you're progressing. By doing that, it's not only that you're going to win and that you're going to stay relevant and all those fantastic things, but it's also that you grow. By doing those videos, I had to structure so much content that I could write a book in 3 months. Exactly. By doing these podcasts or speaking or being on TV, I actually had to work on other things and think about so many things that I didn't have time. I felt I could think and I could work on. It basically pushes you to become better version of yourself. And the more you do that, the more of an expert you become. And then you get people starting following you, and then your confidence rises. And then again, you are a better expert, and then it's just value grows and people grow, and your self-awareness and the way you view yourself also grows and improves. And all of that is absolutely beautiful. That's what happiness is. Oh yeah, what a place to end. Excellent. But I can't end without talking about what's coming next. I mean, it's been awesome today, your insights, Ashley, on personal branding and female entrepreneurship. Next, we enter a new chapter for the Ashley Talks podcast here on Asia Tech Podcast. What comes next? We've got plans. What's going on? Yes. So next, we're going to talk. I'm going to bring a couple of guests, and I'm going to speak with them about branding, about female entrepreneurship. I'm going to speak with them about China and Asia in general. I'm going to be bringing people from business world, from acting world, successful executives, people that I personally love, that I met, that inspire me, that I haven't
me personally, but that I really, really feel would benefit, our listeners. So that's what's coming next. It's going to be conversations with amazing people on a variety of subjects and topics. And I'm extremely excited to bring all of those guests and all of those opportunities and that knowledge and that inspiration to all of you guys.
That sounds so awesome. And you can go and check out the episodes. If you've missed any of the back episodes of Ashley Talks, our pilots, go to atp.show/Ashley Talks. Also link to iTunes. Go and subscribe to iTunes and leave Ashley a review as well. That'd be fantastic. And catch Ashley. Well, we'll put all the details in the show notes, so you can tweet us at Asia Tech Pod. Hashtag Ashley Talks as well, because Ashley will pick that one up as well. So any questions, feedback that you have, especially about today, because today should have provoked some kind of opinion or reaction in people. Female entrepreneurship and branding. More to come.
Thank you so much, Graham.
You've been listening to Asia Tech Podcast. Find out more at atp.show.